So what they're saying is the NED was created to transparently do what the CIA had previously done, regime change all around the world. But this transparency has kind of boomeranged back at them. And so now they are going covert again. And it's kind of the best of both worlds, because the NED still doesn't sound as bad as a CIA-sponsored uprising. But now the NED isn't being transparent at all, and you have to really, really dig to find evidence of which groups specifically are being funded. But if you know how to research properly, you will find entire lists of at least media organizations and sometimes legal and fake human rights organizations funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. And you look and see, either on their website, if it doesn't say on their website, their X or other social media platform, they will be keeping up with current events, and you will see what their position is on any development within a specific country or even around the world for that matter. And so let's go over a list of organizations. This is called the Center for Investigative Journalism of Serbia. It says it is, if you look on their website, it says that it is a member, and of course they have all of these lists of awards that they've been given by the United States, European Union, and all the government and corporate funded foundations that the US uses to pursue primacy all around the globe, including through US-sponsored regime change. So this is already extremely obvious. But it admits all of these organizations that it is a part of, including the Global Investigative Journalism Network. Okay, so then you go to that and you see, if they're not going to admit who funds them there, you go to the organizations that they belong to. If it's an umbrella organization, it's possible the money is being laundered through them to the subsidiary, thus, again, laundering money and support is done specifically to conceal the source of the funding. So if you go to Global Investigative Journalism Network, which this Center for Investigative Journalism of Serbia is a part of, they admit that they're funded by Open Society, all of these other corporate, private foundations that work parallel to the National Endowment for Democracy. And it says, we are grateful for generous core support from founders such as Oak Foundation, the Open Society Foundations, Humanity United, the Reva and David Logan Foundation, the Luminate Group, Hug Morenz Foundation for Media Literacy, the Cottonwood Spring Foundation, and the Bay and Paul Foundations. And if you look all of them up, you will see how the tentacles all spread all across the US and European government. They're private and public fronts that they use to fund sedition all around the world. Now, getting back to the original Center for Investigative Journalism of Serbia, CINS. You look at some of the articles that they have published over the years. Party Funds Database, SNS. This is the party of current president of Serbia, Alexander Vučić, the financially strongest political party in Serbia. If you read through this, they make it sound like they're so shady and abusive, and they've got all of this money, and it's lopsidedly shifting power in their favor. It's unfair. Something should be done about this. So it instantly tells you, a flag should go up and say, these are US, European funded media outfits targeting and undermining the current government. Why would they do that? If that was their client regime of choice, why would they be doing that? There's also, again, another organization connected to Serbia involved in promoting the protests and targeting the current government and trying to undermine it. And that is the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network. And they're very straightforward about who funds them. The European Commission, the British Embassy in Belgrade, Open Society right there, even though they kind of, you gotta kind of squint, you can see it says Open Society Foundation, Serbia. Freedom House, which is a subsidiary of the NED. The NED itself, USAID is still listed there, even though it's been integrated into the State Department, and this branding has been dispensed of. Transparency International, which again is just funded by this collection. It's a self-sustaining cycle where they're all funding each other. An open society funds Transparency International. That will fund a bunch of organizations co-funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. And you could spend all day, all week, all month digging into all of this. And you will see how extensive it is. And when you hear people say, Brian, you think the US is involved everywhere? Well, they literally are, and the evidence is there, and you could spend a lifetime documenting it and mapping it out. So those are the donors for BIRN, or BURN if you want to call it that. And they have a list of partners that fall under them. And it's all of these, there's a variety of organizations here, but there are specific ones that are media organizations. KRIK, K-R-I-K, DONUS. And if you go to their websites, and all you do is your browser probably has a translate to English function, just translate it and see what they're complaining about. And if they're sitting there supporting the protests, and they're condemning Russia, and they're promoting the protests, and they're anti the current government, then you can safely conclude that that is the US government stance. Why would they be funding media organizations attacking a government that they themselves want to keep in power? That is how the color revolutions work. They have media, legal organizations, fake human rights groups that cover up the violence. They refuse to report on the violence of the protesters themselves, and they only report on the responses by the police and military. These are all the pieces that fall into place to make up a US engineered color revolution. This is literally what they've done to Serbia once already, and this is what they are doing again. And they're using the exact same method, albeit a little bit differently, but not much differently. And these are these specific, and I'm naming names and I'm showing you where their funding is coming from. These are the organizations that are involved promoting it. What about US government funded propaganda? Indisputably US government funded propaganda. Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, which everyone thinks President Trump defunded and dismantled. This is from September 1st, 2025, yesterday. Back to school in Serbia, universities seek to break student boycott. And it's all about the heroic youths and students and how heroic they are, protesting the government, demanding change, demanding regime change. And so is very conclusive where the US government stands. You have the Guardian article clearly supporting the protests. They published the president's letter in response to what their official stance was on the protests, which was supporting them. Literally US government funded media, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. They support the protests, and all the NED open society funded media organizations in Serbia themselves support the protests. And another trick that you can use is you go to some of their websites. They don't update often. They have a heavy presence on social media. What you do is you look for, let's just type in KRIK. Here we go. Let's see what they say about the protests. Let's see if they're for or against the protests. And you can see they cross-post all of the groups listed on this list. You will see them cross-post. This is what the NED organizations do in Thailand, where I'm based. They all cross-post each other. It's all a self-referring network of US government-funded propaganda. And so Nuns is on there. If you look, they're on there, right here. Okay? That's how it all works. This is how it works everywhere. It's one playbook, every country. And this media organization in particular, they were the ones covering and digging into and investigating all the corruption surrounding the railway roof collapse that was used. And I'm not saying that's not a legitimate reason to be upset, but that they used that as cover to then push the color revolution forward. That's how they always do it. They do not hijack legitimate protests. They build illegitimate protests around legitimate issues. People are not just going to spontaneously come out and start burning their whole country down because a railway station collapsed. What sense does that even make? It doesn't make any sense. A railway station collapses, you're going to go out, burn things down, and get more people killed in response to it. What do you think you're going to achieve by doing that, especially looking at just Serbia's own recent history alone? What does that serve? Nothing. It serves nothing. Okay, so pinned at the very top of their profile is, again, a story attacking Serbian President Alexander Vučić. It's about all of the corruption that they are using as a catalyst to get these protests going. And then they're going to use violence and the resulting casualties, injuries, and deaths to escalate it, just like they did in Ukraine, just like they did all across the Arab Spring. Again, all premeditated years in advance. These were not spontaneous protests the US swooped in and hijacked. Now, there are people, again, there are people who swear that President Alexander Vučić is a US puppet, pro-EU, pro-NATO. And these are people who are dissatisfied by the compromise and the game that he has been playing to try to balance Serbia between a desire to maintain its relationship with Russia and the rest of the world, and the fact that it's completely surrounded by the Western world. And people don't understand that. Ordinary people don't understand that. They're extremely emotional. Many of them have a tendency towards a more extreme set of options that they haven't really thought through at all. These are the same people that claim Russian President Vladimir Putin is a traitor because he hasn't fired nuclear missiles at London and Washington over the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. These are people that don't think one or two steps ahead of whatever it is that pops into their brain. And I'm not saying that they're bad people, but it's just people that haven't given serious thought to these issues. They're reacting emotionally, just like the people who are getting sucked into these protests through US government-sponsored propaganda, the networks that I was just showing to you, mapping out. So Venezuela, false pretense to use the threat of US military force for regime change. Serbia, NED-funded organizations together with Open Society and EU-funded organizations promoting protests, attacking and undermining the current government in Serbia. So this is why every nation in the multipolar world needs to pass strict NGO laws that identify, defund, and dismantle these US and European funded networks. This is modern day imperialism, alive and well, and literally dividing and destroying countries around the world. Right now as we talk, Serbia and Indonesia, just two examples, and Venezuela is an example of the US just outright threatening it with overt military force and regime change. These nations also need to reform and protect their information space. I talk about information space as a modern domain of national security, just like your land border, your sea, your shores, and your airspace. Your information space is a national security domain that needs to be protected just as carefully as all of your physical domains. If you're not protecting your information space in the 21st century, it's the same as in the 20th century, not having an air force protecting your airspace. You will be easy prey for another nation's aggression and machinations. You also need to create pipelines to train lawyers, journalists, policymakers, and professors to reflect their nation's best interests, not the West's best interests. They should not be going over to the West and studying and then coming back, because what happens is they are indoctrinated, they are plugged into personal and professional social networks. And when they come back, they're still serving those networks and those interests from the West, not their own nation. So these pipelines need to be created inside these countries for these countries. And then from being educated in the country to reflect their own nation's best interests, you have to bring these people into the media, the legal system, and especially the education system, and of course the government itself of the country. You should not have foreign educated people running absolutely everything in a country in, say, Southeast Asia on the other side of the planet. It doesn't even make sense when you really think about it. Now, if protesters want to actually fight about something, let them fight about what that pipeline looks like, because that is how you fix the problems in your country. You create a pipeline that creates qualified people to do these jobs in the media, in education, and in the government. All of these things you complain are inadequate. You create a pipeline that creates qualified people that are actually capable of doing these jobs. You can fight over what that pipeline looks like and the type of people that it produces. What you do not do is go out into the streets and help burn your country down based on narratives and stories and accusations made by media organizations that admit themselves they're literally funded by the US government and cannot do their work without continued US government funding. And of course, they're obviously still being funded by the US government because they're still doing their work. And right now, their work is to promote these protests and attack the current Indonesian government. And the same goes for Serbia. And finally, most important, when you see these protests unfolding, do not try to listen to rhetoric and decipher Western media headlines. Identify the groups that are involved and follow where their funding leads back to. If it leads back to the National Endowment for Democracy, then case closed. It is a US government-sponsored color revolution. That is what's going on in Serbia and in Indonesia. Case closed. And you want to argue all that you want, that I don't like the president, he's a bad guy. That might be, but the US government is funding these protests, and they're burning these two countries down right now as we speak. Figure it out, expose it, speak up about it. If you want to see a brighter future for Serbia, Indonesia, or any other country for that matter, you need to stop the US from dismembering it first before they can go about solving any actual problem you think they have and moving forward in a better direction. I'm going to end it right there. I'm going to continue keeping an eye on all of these hotspots. Venezuela, Serbia, Indonesia, anywhere else US meddling rears its ugly head. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. Check the video description below for all of the links that I referenced. All the NED funding I linked in the video description below. Check the video description below for all of those links. If you don't believe me, it's actually much more extensive than that. This is as much as I can fit into a video. There are also ways you can help support my work. Unlike all of these fake media groups in Serbia and in Indonesia, I'm not funded by a foreign government. I solely depend on my audience to support my work. They are very generous in supporting my work. I greatly appreciate that. You can do that through Buy Me a Coffee or through Patreon, whether it's a one-time donation, donations month to month, or if you don't have any resources at all, please don't apologize for not being able to support me financially. Just helping share my work and getting the word out there about all of this information, that is help enough. I greatly appreciate all of that. All of that is what makes this work possible. So thank you again. And as always, thank you for watching.